And we can just do everybody at once, I guess. That's probably a more feasible thing to do. I don't like the word feasible here.
Okay. All right, it's 6 o'clock. We do have quorum for emergency management, 911, and board of supervisors. I'm going to call this meeting to order, 7 p.m. We'll have
6 p.m.
Excuse me, 6 p.m. Sorry. That was in council. I'm going to have roll call. Doug?
For the 911 board, Carlisle.
Here.
Des Moines.
Here.
Hartford.
Here.
Indianola.
Here.
Jackson Township. Lacona.
Here.
Martinsdale.
Here.
Milo.
Here.
Northern Warren.
Here.
Norwalk.
Here.
Pleasantville. Virginia Township.
Here.
Warren County.
Here.
Warren County Emergency Management.
Here.
Warren County Sheriff.
Here.
And Rob Dennert is on Zoom for West Des Moines.
Okay. Troy, will you do roll call for emergency management?
Warren County Supervisor,
Here.
Sheriff,
Here.
Ackworth, Bevington, Carlisle, Cumming, Des Moines, Hartford,
Here.
Indianola, Lacona, Martinsdale,
Here.
Milo,
Here.
New Virginia,
Here.
Norwalk,
Here.
Sandyville, Spring Hill, St. Mary's,
Here.
and West Des Moines. You have a quorum.
Okay. And could you do the roll call for supervisors?
McIntyre. Here. Peter.
Here.
DeCook.
Here.
Thank you. All right, we're going to just quickly go around the room, say your name and who you're representing. Sheriff, would you like to start?
Joe Carroll, Warren County Sheriff.
Eric Rules, Sheriff's Office.
Matt Hook, Police.
Eric Homer, Mile Fire.
Johnny Beck, Milo Fire Chief.
Jake Zercher, New Virginia Fire Chief and City Council Member. John Smith, Harvard Fire, and Warren County Sheriff.
Dave Duchesne, Harvard Fire Assistant Chief.
Brian Solid, Northern Warren, Assistant Chief.
CJ Shriver, Harvard Fire.
Go ahead.
Steve Garrett, Warren County Communications. Eric Wallace, Lacona Fire Chief.
Climb back.
Oh, me. Ryan Hutton, Indianola Fire Department. Eric Wallace is assistant. Scott Harrison, Martinsville Fire Chief. Martinsville City Council.
Go ahead, Chris.
Chris Decker, Warren County Dispatch. Sherry Wright, Dispatch. Julie Style, Warren County Dispatch. Chrissy Girl, Warren County Dispatch. Allison Berman, Jail Dispatch.
Chuck Gallagher, St. Mary's.
Greg Chia, Indianola Fire.
Hugh Kane for E911.
Michelle Bischoff, Des Moines Fire.
Brad Button, Des Moines Police Department Communications.
Aaron Herb, Indianola Fire.
Candy Petrie, Hartford Mayor.
Tom Phillips, Mayor Norwalk.
Brian Baker, Councilmember, Norwalk.
Aaron DeCook, Warren County Supervisor.
Crystal McIntyre, Warren County Supervisor.
Zach Prickett, Hartford Fire.
Doug Castle, 911 Director.
Troy Bass, Warren County Emergency Management Coordinator.
And I'm Diane Hall, Mayor Milo, and Chair for Emergency Management. All right, I need a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carries. Item number 5, Polk County feasibility study with possible action. Sheriff, would you like to review that for people who weren't at the 911 meeting?
We had a meeting last week where we discussed where Polk County approached us, and I guess to reach out, see if we would consider becoming a regional dispatch center with them, and in the E911 meeting, it was overwhelmingly turned down.
Okay. Does anyone want to add any comments to that? Okay. Well, we're going to, Zach, do you want to just give the numbers of the vote from 911?
So out of the 911 board, we had 1 yes, 3 that abstained, 11 no's, and we had 1 member that was absent. last Monday.
All right, so we're gonna have a vote for emergency management members only. We're gonna do a roll call vote. Yes means that you are in favor of doing the study. No means you are not in favor of doing the study.
Warren County Supervisor,
No.
Sheriff,
Abstain.
Ackworth, let's see, we'll scoot down, Hartford,
No.
Martinsdale,
No.
Milo,
No.
New Virginia,
No.
Norwalk,
No.
St. Mary's.
No.
And I don't have anybody on line far as, okay. Yeah,
Okay,
I don't have anybody else.
all right.
We've tried.
All right, so, motion fails. So, Board of Supervisors, do you care to do anything at this point in this meeting with that? Okay. All right, moving on. Next item is the future independent communication study with possible action. I believe Darren spoke about this. Did you want to say anything, Darren?
Regarding,
Independent study, possible independent study in the future? Or is that, I mean, I just wanted to put it on the agenda, so if you wanted to say something about it with all parties involved, that you could do that.
I have nothing to say about an independent
Okay.
study at this time.
Okay. Does anyone else wish to comment about that?
I'll speak about it.
Okay.
In the discussion we had about Polk County feasibility study, it was mentioned that one of the better possibilities would be a study, feasibility study, looking at Warren County as a dispatch center, setting it up as a, what do you call it,
Regional?
regional dispatch center. And with that, I think there's some benefits to that study because our communication center, though we have had some infrastructure studies in 2014, 2017, there was not a lot in there that related to staffing and standards as far as the dispatch center goes. And I think when we're looking at a dispatch center, the standards, or we're ascribing to a standard, whether it be APCO or NFPA standard, striving to achieve that provides a high level of service for the citizens. And it's up to us as community leaders to make sure that we're providing the best service we can for the dollars that they pay. And so, in addition to looking at it as a regional center, that study would provide us some benchmarks that we could achieve. I think there was no disputing that the dispatchers are frustrated with the amount of training, the level of training that they've received at this point, up to this point. I think there's no disputing with some agencies having pulled out of Warren County and some other full-time agencies that work within Warren County kind of frustrated with the dispatch situation. And again, this is not to reflect on the people that operate the center, as I don't think they've been given the resources to perform the job that they need to do for the county. So with that, I just feel that as a leader in the position where I serve, especially when we're looking at ways to fund a dispatch center, we're talking about putting it under EMA, if we're talking about doing it for the purposes of obtaining more money to perform that service, if nobody has an idea in this county what that looks like as far as standards go, which I don't know, I haven't heard from or seen any of that yet, not in the studies that were performed or not from any of these meetings. If we don't know what that looks like, we need a starting point, especially if you're gonna ask the citizens to pay more money into that system. That was my discussion of it. I don't know if there's any more discussion. I'd be happy to make a motion from that.
Okay. This was actually looked at by EMA more than 2 years ago, and the wheels started turning to hire the communications director, which we actually did. And in the short time that he was here, he did put together standard operating procedures and put together several items that could be implemented over time. So that really has been looked at. I think EMA, or discussions that I've had with other EMA members, that this has gone through in-depth evaluations, and we'd just like that opportunity to roll this out, get the dispatch trained, get some people in there to take a little pressure off them, and get those standards to where everybody's operating very efficiently and, you know, in a more directed environment. I did hear from one dispatcher that neglected, came out of our conversation. They felt neglected, so it would be really great for them to get some attention that they are, you know, much deserving for. So, Crystal, you want to add anything to that, or anybody else, EMA, want to comment?
Well, as far as the standards and training, they do need a full-time supervisor, and they need NAPCO, all of the training that they do not have right now. I was fearful of wanting this to go into the public, for the public knowing, you know, that they have been neglected for so many years. But it's out there now, so.
Is there correspondence with the information from those studies or what's been put out there? Because what I've received in the 2014 and 2017 study didn't cover any of the 1710, 1720 standards or any of the standards that NFPA has out for dispatch centers.
Yeah, and I don't know, I can't answer that. I mean, I'm not familiar with those trainings, but I know what is out there is on the county cloud.
And so you had stated that that was in there, none of that was in that when I browsed through this.
Okay.
If somebody'd be happy to point to the pages on that
Okay.
information, it's not.
Okay.
If I may, this study
Yes, please.
references the standards, and then the expectation is that you then go to the standard, right, to see what the benchmarks are, and then you have to get the data. You're right, the studies don't have we're performing at X on given measures forward. It just points to, we should be using APCO standards, NENA standards, NPA standards. It does not say where we are performing at this given time. So I think if we were able to produce that type of information, that would give us here's where we're performing, given, I mean, you have to give it the full look, given current conditions, you know, there's a measure of how many calls a call taker should take, and all of those measures, so we're not, you have to look at it in totality, just not how the individual is performing.
Mm-hmm. So set benchmarks.
And take it down to the individual. I mean, it's too easy and too quick to say, well, they're just not working hard enough. That is not the case. It is the system that they're working within that has to be looked at in totality.
So I think doing that study before we consider where it's going to be positioned as far as that goes is important to guide the direction for those of us that serve on that board and that serve our communities in whatever capacity it is we can mayor, to make sure that we're doing our due diligence to make sure that we're going to provide that service for that dollar, whatever that dollar amount is.
Mm-hmm. So what would you feel the scope of that needs to be, the scope of that study?
I
Just
think
to
our
find the
infrastructure-
benchmarks, or?
Yeah, our infrastructure's been dealt with well in the studies. I see no area where that needs to be addressed necessarily. You got a brand new, probably gonna be state-of-the-art communication center, and I know that they're looking at some CAD software still. But I think all that is gonna play into your amount of staffing and what you can do with it. So I think that a study that would look at maybe that, and then your staffing levels, what the training they need, what can our dispatch center look like as far as supervision? And how can we provide that with the resources that we have or with the resources that we can't have if it's gonna go under EMA? Again, it's just setting that benchmark, this is what it looks like, and then we can go and say these are the ones that we can do, rather than saying this is the money we're gonna collect, now let's throw a supervisor in there and hope that he makes a difference or hope that there's change.
Any other input?
I think like a time frame study of how long is it gonna take to get to the standards? What are the standards we want to achieve? What are the goals of our dispatch? How are we gonna measure performance? I would like to know, or at least get an idea on what is our county in for to get to where we want to go from a time frame standpoint. Because we all know we have some issues, and we all want to resolve the issues, but I don't want to be sitting here 4 or 5 years from now in the same situation, so we should get more information, more details, and have more strategy on what what it's gonna take.
How do you see it, how do you see it happening in the interim between today and when the study's completed? What are we doing for dispatch?
Right.
I mean, personally don't feel like we can wait until that study's completed before we move dispatch. How do you feel about that?
I do, I think.
I agree. I feel that you can't wait. There are things that need to be addressed. Dispatch has been waiting for years.
Okay.
And there is structure that needs to be in there, and it needs to be
Okay.
in now.
All right.
No matter what choice you choose.
I want to let Darren finish his thought. Darren? Excuse me.
You know, I think just moving it to another entity within the county doesn't necessarily guarantee success. It doesn't guarantee that we're gonna get the right person. It doesn't, I think the person that comes in and runs dispatch, I've talked to 3 dispatchers and 2 of the 3 liked the way they were being managed. If Eric Burrows could stay in place and he wasn't pulled away, like, to say that it's not being managed correctly now, I'd like to see some numbers in that argument, like number of complaints from the citizens, what's the measurement of productivity. I think there's a lot of things we don't know. Just to say dispatch isn't being ran well now and we have some complaints, I'm not so sure that that's necessarily true. I think internally we have some issues.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Candy?
I just, I don't make it to every single meeting, so forgive me for if I'm misspeaking here, but the few EMA meetings that I've been at over the course of the past 2.5 years, I don't think this is about current management at all. I think this is about a culmination of many years of mismanagement and lack of guidance and direction. And regardless of who gets put in charge, all the benchmarks need to be there.
Right.
I think there was some structure set up originally when EMA intended to take it over originally. I don't know what's happened with that. I don't know where we're at with that, if that stuff has all been just file 13 and we're starting over, or what the situation is, but I don't want to get lost in the weeds about the current situation and forget that this has been going on for many years. So whatever we're doing tonight, I think we need a clear-cut timeline to get it in place and get these people what they need while alleviating the budget issues.
The other side, I think I mentioned to Sheriff a minute ago, is they already worked a lot. I mean, we're talking, I think we figured out 248 hours on this next schedule coming out, just in overtime.
Yeah.
Which is a lot of money, a lot of everything, but it's a lot of their time. To get to the standard we want to get to, how much training does that take? And you're also asking these ladies and gentlemen to take time away on their off days to go to maybe training. I mean, we've got to consider that, so our manpower's got to come up.
Right.
I understand we just hired the 3 part-timers right now, and they're in the very first week of training. And that's gonna take some time to get there too, but manpower has got to be an issue. If you're trying to get anywhere standard-wise, you can't expect them to work a 6-day rotation, 12-hour days for 3 or 4 of those, and then turn around on their days off and go to training all day. I mean, we've got to address that issue too.
Absolutely. And I feel like with the time that you spent with them, and I know it hasn't been a lot of time, in 6 months, right? Is that?
Not even that.
Yeah. So do you feel like you have a good handle on what's needed to get that going?
I can't say this enough. I've been a user for 20 years. I am not a dispatcher at heart. I didn't do that. I have never done that. I do have some experience there a little bit, but it's very little. It would take time for me to even get up to speed, let alone I'd have to become essentially a dispatcher, learn how to do it all. It takes time on their end, on my end, altogether.
Definitely.
Is it possible? Yeah, anything is possible.
I think that's what I was saying the last meeting when I reiterated. It isn't that I don't think that Eric can't be a good leader, and I guess I'm gonna have to disagree a little bit about the meeting I had with Darren, because I think Darren and I both said at the same meeting, I'm not sure that this management knows how to get it where it is, not because they can't figure it out or learn it or study it, but because they don't have the time at the moment. They have a jail, they're understaffed, it's those issues. It's not necessarily the leadership
Right.
that we're talking about. It's not that, but Eric is being utilized for other things.
Sure.
And so that takes away from the dispatch center. And that, in my discussions with Aaron, I was under the impression that we both agreed with that. It isn't an attack on either one of those two people, it's just,
I spent the majority of my day on patrol today,
yes.
on one side of the county, while the other deputy was on the other. Again, we have manpower issues,
Yeah.
just like every place.
But there's manpower issues in the fire departments. I mean, some of these dispatchers are borrowing and stealing paramedics from different places because they don't have people to take the calls. I mean,
Tony?
it's it isn't just this stuff.
Mhm. Tony?
So my question is, we talk about being understaffed, we don't have proper management. Before we even do the study, why wouldn't we put all them into place so we can make sure we do the study properly? Because it makes no sense to do a study right now when we don't even have the manpower, and we don't have the right management to be doing it, so the study would be pretty much useless. Correct or wrong? I mean, I don't know why we would.
I disagree with that, because your study is gonna pull that data and tell you that you're missing those positions, or you're missing this benchmark because of that. And I think that's a huge part of the data that you wanna gather, because if you don't gather that data, then Crystal can make anything up and say that she just did it because she read 1720. One of the standards.
I think what you're missing though is we need people in place now. Now, they
No,
can
that
always
is part of it.
improve.
No, I agree.
No, they can improve. You can set
No,
standards for
you're
them,
right, you
and if they
can't
don't
improve.
make it,
There's
then you
nothing
fire them and you
about
get
trying to
someone who
improve.
can.
Like this right now.
You're not listening to the.
You're not listening either.
No, I am, because I've been watching this now for 6 years.
But this is the first meeting you've been to in a
No,
very
it's
long
not.
time.
No, it is
Yes.
not. Just because I go on a computer doesn't mean that I have to be now physically
You
there.
need to stop
Okay,
having meetings behind the scenes and start coming to meetings.
Crystal.
Okay.
You wake up whenever you want.
Okay, excuse me, hold on, we're
That's
gonna,
fine.
Let's not get
let's keep,
sidetracked.
yeah, we're gonna keep on track here. So, if you'd like to finish your point about the
No,
study.
if you don't have benchmarks and you gather your data, how do you know where you're gonna be headed?
Mhm.
And what needs to be in place? If it's personnel, that's gonna come out. If it's the standards, and which standards you need to follow. That's what you're gonna identify.
My personal thought is, like dispatch, I'll put this in terms for you. This is like, there's a major head wound, and and then, we need to stop this bleeding in dispatch. But someone's wanting to maybe talk about your lifestyle choices, as far as exercise and diet, So I think we need to stop the bleeding, get these people what they need, give them the tools to succeed. Steve, I'm sorry, Steve.
Just real quick, I want everybody to know, I've been with the communications center for 20 years, and I was the last full-time position added for 9 people 20 years ago. So for 20 years, we've only had 9 people. And it used to be, we didn't work so much because we was like one person overnight, which was wrong. I'm not saying nothing about it. The biggest point is, I understand the studies, I've talked to multiple people, I've got the standards I am. But you're also gonna have to hire more people, period.
In those 20 years, we've added, by having 2 dispatchers around the clock.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've added 8 man-hours per day and no additional staff. And that's the strain, especially when you run into your vacation seasons, that's the strain on the dispatchers.
And that's where I go, and I'm with Chris, I'm not saying they're not doing a job, because they've got so much on their plate, but they allow us to have people off on vacation. They could say, hey, sorry, you're not getting it, because there's already people off. So that would make it even worse, because you couldn't get time off at all. But, that said, the top of the point is, I'm for studies, I'm not arguing that we need to get up to a standard, I'm good, but you're not gonna get a standard until you start getting staff. And I'm sorry if people don't understand staff, I get tired, I get cranky. So you want customer service, you want me not to get cranky on the radio, you want me not to be cranky and sit and call me on 911 because their dog did something in their neighbor's dog did something in their yard, when I've got somebody over here having CPR in progress. when you're tired, you're tired. I'm not saying I don't do a better job, I just get cranky. And then when I'm not volunteer for or God bless them because it's tough. But when you got people and you're trying to get people help, I mean, it goes for every fire department in there. Everyone, you've had to sit there and talk to people for 30, 40, 50 minutes to get somebody help. And when you're tired, that makes it even worse. So a staffing issue has to be addressed. I'm sorry, I'm not gonna say this. I don't care which board, or supervisors, EMA, 911 board, Polk County, whoever, we have an issue with our staffing that needs to be addressed, period.
Andy, did you want something?
Well, I just wanted to circle back to what you were saying. And the benchmarks that you were discussing, we didn't really dig into that very far, but from where I'm sitting, it sounds to me like we need benchmarks established for a supervisory role and the dispatcher role. Is that what you're getting at?
Yes.
And in order to, I agree with you that we do need studies, and to the extent that, I mean, it doesn't need to drag on and on and on, I don't think. I think it's something you can do fairly easily by reaching out to some of the other county dispatch offices and finding out what their benchmarks.
You can put your own parameters on it.
Sure, sure.
Give them 60 days, give them 90 days, and say, hey, we need this information now.
But I think in order to do that, we have to establish who's going to be responsible for that, correct? Wouldn't you agree?
Yes.
So
And
is
that's
that
the
gonna
key thing.
be
So is it gonna be the supervisors?
right?
First of all, do they have the knowledge to do it? Or is it gonna be the sheriff?
Though, right?
I'm talking about the standard.
Sure.
Is it gonna be EMA? Do they have the knowledge for it, what standard it's gonna be? Or does it stay under the sheriff?
Right.
Right now, historically, the sheriff's got that.
And what's the motivation for moving it under EMA? Because that was discussed in the prior meeting, and what I got from the prior meeting, the motivation was uncapped funding. As I understand it, that was the only thing that was brought out in that discussion. So we're talking about collecting money and then deciding how we're gonna make the purchase.
What?
Versus knowing what you need, what do we need as far as a product, and then what do we have the money to fund that need with?
Well, at this point, and it's historically been this way, the sheriff's department doesn't have time to devote to dispatch. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
No, and with what we set out originally, earlier in the year, and then we had a retirement that was unexpected, and that did short us on manpower, and that took Eric away from a lot of the time that was going to be dedicated in the first coming months. Kind of how I laid out a percentage in some of the discussions was once things were up to level, if you will, his time spent in dispatch would be approximately 60%, and it would roll back a little bit to patrol, a little bit to equipment. Initially, the first 6-8 months out of the gate, he was going to be predominantly in dispatch. And I had spoke with a deputy that ended up retiring, at the time had not intended to retire, and he had an opportunity to come up, took it, and that shorted us on patrol. We're in the hiring process now, but hiring a deputy, hiring a dispatcher is not something you can do in 2 weeks. And realistically, where we are at right now, by the time we get a deputy hired and trained to where we can get Eric back in there full time, I mean, we're looking at October, November probably, and given the time frame that was set out initially, it's not feasible for us to hold true to what we originally thought. And after the last E911 meeting, you know, I had a meeting with fire chiefs a month and a half ago, and I asked for their input. I value their input, and if we don't want to consider becoming regional, and we joining regional, we want to either consider becoming a regional or staying in Warren County, I'm good with that. And I told the fire chiefs that I respect their opinions and I value their opinions, and overwhelmingly they want to stay in county. We need to work now with what is going to facilitate that for everybody. What is the best thing to step back and say, okay, look, this is our goal. And I understand there might be multiple paths to get there as far as our certification, and I guess too, I want to say this too, when we talk about standards, we talk about, because there's been some words I think that can be interchanged, and I want to clarify what I mean. We talk about certification levels versus professionalism. Our dispatchers, for the hours they put in, they do a good job. Their certification levels can't be held against them for the fact that we don't have the staff to get them to training. We don't have the staff to we don't have the resources to get there. That's where I think when the end goal we're wanting to get to, after the E911 meeting, that's where I sat back and said, okay, look, this is what I think is gonna be best for the county. If this is how it needs to be funded, if this is how it needs to be set up, which brings our dispatch certification level up to what we expect as elected officials, as county citizens. That was the point of reaching out and starting to pursue the path to EMA again. Every month it gets, and I'm not saying that every month we do this, but every month that it gets kicked to the next meeting for this or for that, it's another month down the road, then it's another quarter down the road, and then it's another fiscal year down the road. And far beyond this 5.5 months so far. I mean, this is something that people in here have already said, this has been going on for years, and we just need to, we don't need to dive headlong into something. I'm not saying that when we're fixing to spend a lot of money, but at the end of the day, we do need to have a path, and we need to say, okay, this is our goal, this is how we can attain it, since it's been decided that we want to stay. And there's only so many ways you can get there, and we just have to pick that path and go.
So is there a reason if we stick it under EMA that we can't also do the study then to put that in the works?
Yeah.
No, that'd be awesome.
Sure,
I
that
think-
would be great. I think it should be done.
I think
I
as a
understand the
coordinator,
benchmarks, But I think we're kind of getting the cart ahead of the horse, because you have to have a foundation and you have to have a framework in order to, and then set your benchmarks, but you gotta have something to start from.
Right.
First, I mean, we don't even have home, really, we're still up in the air. So,
We're working.
although I'm
We're
not
working on
totally
it.
disagreeing with him, I'm just saying that I don't know that benchmarks are the first priority here. I think we have to have a foundation and some framework.
We're working towards that.
I'm-
We're gonna get there.
I don't think it's anything that we're foreign to. We were operating with 2 per shift in Indianola.
I'm sorry, what?
I said, it's not anything that we're foreign to. We were operating with 2 per shift before we got it up to the 5 that we're gonna have this July. So it's not us understanding being overwhelmed in the position we are, but the city did put a study out there to make sure that this is exactly what we needed. So I mean, I'm not necessarily opposed to sticking under EMA for funding purposes, if that's what it is. As long as we're doing our due diligence, let's go ahead and get the study in the works as well, so we make sure that we're making the right applications as we go along.
So.
Yes, I have a question too. The previous study, obviously, I haven't seen, but I thought that it addressed that there was a problem with our staffing at that time, and it's not been brought up. So I guess I'm looking at what Chris is saying. Why, if we knew that there's a staffing problem, why are we not bringing that up to set our bench before we do anything else?
Well, that's what we've been working on, trying to get this to EMA
Yeah, are you
and have a
talking about
director.
17? 'Cause 17
I'm sorry,
is
just,
really
No, I think it was after that. I think there in 17 isn't the last one, is it?
Yes,
It was.
14 and 17 were done.
so,
And really, there's not much at all that, and unfortunately, addresses that side.
okay,
It talks about the communication system itself as a whole, and the radio, and what kind of coverage. But then again, it just slightly alludes to the standards, and leaves it as, all right, this is the standard you should
okay.
follow.
I'd like to get back on topic here, Shel.
I guess I have a question on what do you hope that the study comes back and tells you? That you need X number of dispatchers and X number of supervisors?
Well, that's why I was trying to get
and
to the scope of it,
performance-
because
and
originally,
then does it include performance standards and coming up saying that you're going to follow the APCO standards for this, that, and the other, the NFPA standards for this, that, and
Right.
the other? Is that what you're hoping to get from a standard or from a study? I'm
you have
not
to have
sure-
somebody who wants to study, so that's why I was trying to get to the scope.
I'm not sure what the outcome of this
Exactly.
study is, because if the study is to find out how well we fit against the standards are just that, standards. It's a matter of looking at your data and seeing how well you measure up against those standards. If you don't have any what?
I mean, you don't have standards.
Standards, no, the standards exist. So think of the standards is the grading scale in school. Everyone knows that 90% is an A, 80% is a B, C, down the scale. That's what these NFPA and APCO standards are. It's For the, I'll use response times because I know those better. That there's a response time of, and now I can't think of them, so that's the way it works. that a fire truck arrive at someone's door within 7 minutes, 8 minutes. How well does your system perform to do that? Do you do that 70% of the time, 80% of the time? How often? I don't, you know this communication standards better than I, but there's how quickly do you answer the phone? How quickly do you get that alarm, that alarm processed, i.e. tell the big red trucks or the cop cars that they need to go from wherever they are to wherever they're needed?
So what I'm hearing is that the standards, nothing's been measured.
Yeah,
basically.
we just have to say, here's our data.
So we don't have to hire, do we have to hire a company to do that? Somebody who knows the system needs to tell me.
No, having a company do that then tells you, this is what you could do it with, the resources that you could possibly provide, and this is what you need to pursue to hire. So it'll give you a range. So it'll say if you hire this, you should be able to achieve this. Rather than saying, we're busy, so let's hire 3 more dispatchers. How do you know you need 3 more dispatchers?
Okay.
And what are 3 more dispatchers gonna do for you to help you achieve this benchmark?
So E911's already had one of these studies done?
We've had a study done for our personnel in 2016, 2017.
2017.
And all of our hirings that were done on the council were done based on that study. A lot of the changes to the training department, the changes within there, all came from that study. The decision to keep the station right where it sits was based on a study and looking at evaluating all our response times to make sure that the location where the fire department is the best location. It was a staffing study, but it examined many aspects of it. And then the council that sits there is making their decisions based on objective evidence, not subjective evidence, to make sure that we're providing the best service that we can to the citizens for the dollar that they're gonna pay for that service. And that's all I'm saying the study's gonna do. It looks at the standards, it looks at what we have, it looks at what we've done, it looks at what we can do, and then it says, if you do this, you should be able to do that. So it gives you somewhere to go. So I'm not opposed to it. They need more staff. I'm not gonna argue that. I'm just saying, how many staff? Is it 3? And it might be a supervisor saying, we need 3 more people, but they don't know. Because they haven't analyzed the data to determine that that is the best suitable solution for the problems we're dealing with.
So did that study, was that like a 4-week study, a 6-week study?
Chief, can you help me on that?
Actually, it was about a 6-month.
A 6-month study?
Because they went through all our financials,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a broad spectrum of.
But it was more than
designed, but it was designed by us. We designed it because we were looking for these key things.
Do you have any idea on the cost, what that cost at that time?
It was out to bid. There were 7 companies that put in. I think we ended up, it was right around 40 grand. But it took not only staffing, but there was, like I said, there was a multitude of aspects that they looked at. And the financials were huge in this.
There are staffing models through APCO and NINA that are already out there. You just have to plug in the data. There's APCO retains, they're for $125 you can get retains, but you have to have the data to plug in there, otherwise it.
And the study.
And I don't know if that ability is here.
And the studies aren't going to go mine your data, you have to give them your data.
I've been through one of those studies before, and it's a lot of filling out sheets of time and what,
Steve, I'll get to you in a
how much
second.
time you spend on every activity. And
So you're asking about the shortage of people and whatever, and how we're supposed to operate. We already know some of that data that will trigger into a local study. I feel would be beneficial, but can we afford it, number one? And 2, look at what type of operating system, such as the med, whatever you guys call it, the medical part of stuff, EMD, and there's some others out there. What best fits Warren County Communication Center? So doing a local study, to me, makes pretty good sense. It's just when we do it and how we're gonna pay for it.
Okay, Steve?
I just want to touch on, I don't know who, where, 3 people to be hired full-time just came up with, because some of us have taken active role in trying to do and help get this going. And Chris had found from another agency what they call a Panama schedule, which is a schedule that gives people 2 weekends off, and they work 12 hours, a couple days here, 3 days here. I'm not sure the whole thing without seeing it in front of me, but it cut, we figured out 80% of the overtime down. Sometimes you had 3 people staffed at all times, so sometimes you had 3 people, you still be staffed at 2 and have training without paying overtime. And it took the well-being of the employees, not just the money. I know 3 full-time people cost a lot more than all this overtime we're working, but it looked at the well-being of the employees as, that's for the 3 people. I'm not saying that's the magic number to fix. I'm not saying we should do a study, because I just want people to know where 3 people came from. It just, that's where it came from.
I just pulled the number out, Steve. I
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Yes, you said the overtime, we put 3 people in the chair. If 2 people a day were gone on vacation, and still let you have 2 people in the chair. The only time you have overtime is somebody called in sick when 2 people are gone on vacation. Then you have overtime you have to deal with.
So it sounds like there are some tools available to us that need implemented, like going forward tomorrow. So, I mean, I think, you know, priorities, our people are our priorities. They're our greatest asset. With all this money that we're investing in stuff, that doesn't count for what these people do for us. So
I don't think we disagree, but my concern, just to echo it again, is how does that function together as a system? Our infrastructure, our staffing, the CAD system we're seeking to purchase, how does that all mesh and integrate together? And I don't know that anybody here, I'm not gonna say anybody doesn't, I don't know that anybody here has that knowledge base that can come from a company that would say, this is what you need to have to work best for you. This is what you need to pursue. And then we can look at it as a group and say, yeah, that's great. What would be unfortunate is if we invest in a CAD system, or we start to throw staff in and build a structure for our staffing structure that doesn't complement our communication systems or our CAD systems. How does that all fit together? Does anybody here know that? And if so, can you provide us that information so that we can provide that to our constituents and the people that we represent?
anyone else?
Also too, I just want to touch base on the schedule. When you talk about switching schedules, that's more than just a, hey, let's try this one. There's union contracts involved. We can't just, next Tuesday, we're going to try this schedule for a month. I mean, there's a lot of work in there. And
There's nothing in the union contract about changing the schedule.
Yes, there is.
Not to that one, though.
Yes, it's written into our contract. We are a 6 and 3.
Did you get it signed?
Yes, the contract is. It's written in there as of right now, in order to change it before that contract comes up.
But you should be able to do an MOU to change.
We can do an MOU, yes, that's what I'm saying. It is written in there now that we are 6 on and 3 off. It is designated that way, it's written that way into the contract. But that doesn't mean that we couldn't reach an agreement, which is why I started, when the issues of comp time and the overtime issue was coming up, I went to work on trying to come up with a schedule that would work, that be mutually beneficial. I mean, like Marion County has a schedule, but they have a lot of turnover. So part of your scheduling is how to keep some of your people. And we do have, like I said last meeting, I think we have 134 years of experience of those 9 people. So you've kept them partly on the schedule. But now the scheduling is kind of crazy because we don't have enough staff. So I'm just saying, you gotta take both of that into consideration in order to keep your people. Otherwise, you're constantly training people because you're having turnover, and then you've really gotten nowhere.
Okay.
But that can be an MOU, a member, whatever they call that, can be done in order to.
Okay, that's good
But it would
information.
have to be something done through the union and the board or EMA or sheriff or whoever.
Okay. Anyone? Yes.
It sounds to me like we do need to have a communication study at some point in time to determine staffing standards and strategy.
Okay. Would you like to make a motion to that effect?
But I don't know that it says future independent communication study. I wonder if it should be future independent communication study. I think we need to address supervisor for the staff. I think we need to start training, because there's basic training that they need at this point in
Right.
time, and certifications, and we can start, that process can start. And we need to determine where they're gonna land, even if it's an interim landing spot.
So you're saying in the we need to determine that regardless of the study?
I think we need to start, I think we need to do those things before we do a study.
Yes, okay, I would agree with that.
I think it's gonna take, that's gonna take a little bit of time.
Hang on, just, Chief.
So I think we should take the time to do those. And then in the interim, we can start hashing out what's gonna be in that study and who's gonna do it and what data is needed, and we can get started on the study or the mechanics of that study while all this other stuff is going on. And then vote to do the study.
Okay, thank you. Chief?
Chief Ticket, go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me?
For the most part.
Yeah. I think my comments are gonna be quite a bit in line with those I just heard. I haven't heard a lot of the meeting, just because that's probably a little bit on my end as well. I think there's really three things here that keep overlapping and it kind of keeps tripping us up. One of them is the issue of the governance that really is, as a commission member, I think governance
Thank you, Chief.
My only concern with what Chief just said is I've also heard Sheriff Carrico say that because of staffing issues that he has right now, he doesn't really have time. Chief was talking about that. I looked over at Joe. It looks like he's thinking, how the hell am I going to have time to do any of that?
So,
Am I wrong?
so
We'll get it if we need it.
is there I don't want to stage a coup here, okay, this is just a suggestion. Is there someone on the current dispatch staff who could take point and work directly with you to coordinate some of this stuff, to get them through while the study's being done? Is that a possibility?
Well, it's a possibility, but I cannot have the inside bitterness between people.
Right.
I'm telling you guys, that's gotta stop.
So I don't know the dynamics,
Yeah,
but
I know
I
it's
know how
like
that
that.
works when you've got a bunch of people who work together and you're in tight quarters and you've got frustration because you're all overworked and that kind of thing. But it's gonna take a team effort to get this done because we are so short-staffed everywhere. So if we could figure out a way to make that work in the interim, while all this, because this is gonna take time. You wanna do a study, I mean, we've already heard it's gonna take at least 6 months to get a study back that's gonna give us what we need to get a good foundation built. But you gotta start somewhere, and you don't have time to do your own responsibilities, let alone trying to manage everybody else's, so I get that.
But even for a study though, that, the data needs to be collected locally, even for the study. So, 2 birds, 1 stone, knock it out locally to make the decisions that you need, and then when it comes time for the study, you've already got it.
But I think,
And some of that stuff that Chief DeKitt was talking about, with the different PSAPs and the certifications that they have and the data, we've got that already.
And that's
spread around the whole county. We'd be
That's-
happy to share those things with
We've
you.
reached out to St. Holt, to Sheriff Snyder, Sheriff St.
Yeah.
Holt. We can get that information. I mean, getting it is really not that far of a reach. Putting it into what we want as a usable form, that might be to where, okay, guys, what do we want to glean from this section and that section? Getting the information is not going to be hard.
so maybe that's where, the last time I met with all of you, I think we had talked about forming a committee to determine some of that stuff. So maybe that's where that committee can help you.
And we still have all the
If
members
you
for
wanna
that.
do that.
Yep.
I mean, I don't know, but we've gotta, I can't keep coming to these meetings month after month, and it's not fair to you guys. We gotta do something, so let's
Thank you.
figure it out.
I'm just tired
I'll
of
say that too. I think we just
Yeah.
plan a meeting to plan a meeting. That's what it seems to me
Yeah.
every time we come here.
Agreed.
All we do is talk, everybody gives their opinion, and we plan another damn meeting. And it gets us nowhere.
This time,
That's
Eric,
what-
we have the elected officials, which you hadn't had before. You had a supervisor, but you didn't have the commission, which is the mayors that are the ones that.
Well, then show me something. That's what I'd like to see.
Well, that's what I'd like to do right now. So can we come to some sort of a plan and get something going? Because, I mean, everybody's frustrated. And it's stinking hot here.
Julie's got something.
I understand what you're
Hold
saying,
on.
but if we already have a staffing issue, we pull somebody out of our staff to do what you're saying. Because they would have to dedicate time to just that. No, they would have to dedicate full-time. It's a full-time position.
Okay.
So you pull somebody out of our staff, we already have a staffing issue, where are we then?
Right.
Okay.
And this management team just said that they really don't have the time. So
Okay, I want to bring this back around here because we could talk about this all night long, and I don't want to stay here all night.
I'd like to make a motion to table the communication study.
I have a motion on the table to table the communications study. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carries. We will table that to a future meeting when someone can have an actual plan to put the, want it on the agenda, let's have a plan. Okay, next item, thank you. Dispatch transition path discussion with possible action. This was discussed more than 2 years ago about moving it to emergency management. Talk about there's nobody in dispatch who has time to do this, there's nobody in sheriff's department has time to do this. That's what the communications director's job is outlined to be, to do those things, as a new position. So, the proposal is to, starting July of 2022, that it would come under EMA, their budget, that's fiscal 2023. So in the meantime, we would need it to go to Board of Supervisors if it comes out from under the Sheriff's Department, which I believe that you thought that was okay
No, I
for
never
sheriff's.
mentioned going to the Board of Supervisors.
Well,
But
I think it
transition,
said, but because of budget, because we have to get through this budget year, because there is no budget in EMA.
correct,
So
yep.
it would have to go temporarily under Board of Supervisors before it could transition to EMA.
I guess that may be, dispatch is in our budget this year, but I do think the transition to EMA, for budgetary purposes, if that's where we wanna be with everything in-house, that's where it's gonna have to go.
Yeah, Dan, I have a question.
Yes.
I wasn't tracking that either. I understand the logistics financially of movement to EMA, as there's a different levy rate. I get it. But whether it stays under the sheriff's budget or the Board of Supervisors budget, I don't see how there's any cost savings one way or the other. I'm not saying.
There's not gonna be a cost savings, it's gonna be a time issue and a dedication issue as far as.
I thought the reasoning that I heard was budgetary.
Well,
reasons.
yes,
But there is-
after this coming up fiscal year.
But whether the Board of Supervisors allocates a larger Board of Supervisor budget or a sheriff's budget, and it's 6 one, half dozen the other, there's no fiscal savings either way there. It might, and I'm not disagreeing, I think there might be some time savings if the sheriff's saying that we don't have the ability to handle it, but there's no financial savings there, whether it's under the sheriff's budget or the board's budget that I can tell.
The way I understand it's availability of funding, correct? Because the sheriff's budget is capped, is that correct, Crystal?
Well, it all comes out of the same general fund. I think the time savings that you're referring to may be that right now, since the dispatchers are underneath the sheriff, we wouldn't have to go through him to make any changes in that office or hire a supervisor. We wouldn't have to seek his approval. It would just come directly as if they are a department underneath the Board of Supervisors like we have now.
To get you through the 2020 fiscal year.
Until
Right.
we transition.
Then you
to
get
the-
your, whatever, in a
But-
row for fiscal.
I'm just clarifying for everyone in the room to understand that I get the EMA different levy rate. I understand that. But between the sheriff's department, general funds going to the sheriff's department, holding dispatch, or the board's budget, there is no savings there. There's other reasons that might very well be valid, but it's not a financial reason.
It's not gonna be a save,
There's
not gonna be a money saved, regardless of where they go.
I heard that, I just wanted to clarify that's not accurate.
There was something I was gonna say there, I've lost it. So I guess that is the thought that, has been with EMA for the last 2+ years.
So, circling back to
Mhm.
budget, sorry again, ignorance hanging out here. So right now, because I think at one point, didn't we have it in our budget to take that lead on that?
Yes.
And so we must have amended the budget to take that out? Is that what you're saying? And we can't amend to put it back at this point?
No.
Okay, just want to make sure I understood what the deal was. Okay.
So, help me understand this again, because we talked about this when we put it on the agenda, and I thought I had it then, but I don't now, so help me again. What's this item actually addressing? Is it the hiring of the supervisor, or is it?
It's where dispatch is gonna be
Who's
seated.
gonna manage it?
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of moving it under the board for the interim is to alleviate the burden from the sheriff's department? Is that what I'm
Yes.
understanding?
Yes.
Is that are you-
Yes, okay.
Yes. Is that your understanding as well?
That's, from what they're saying, that's my understanding. yeah.
Okay, I just wanna make sure we're all on the same page.
Yes, it's complex.
Okay.
especially when you're working in budgets, years that haven't started yet. That makes it more complex.
I have a question.
Yes.
If it goes under the board of supervisors, who manages them?
EMA will manage it. EMA will continue with doing the search for a supervisor with input from, like we had before. We didn't have dispatch involved before, but they would be involved this time. But we have one supervisors, EMA, HR.
So is it, sorry.
No, you're fine, go ahead.
So if I'm understanding it, that it's multifaceted. It's really more governance over dispatch and supervisory managerial control over dispatch is no longer in the sheriff's office, but rather under the board of supervisors, and then transferred effectively to emergency management with the budget to follow
Yes.
the following fiscal year.
Yes.
Is that what's on the table?
That's what I was just gonna say.
All right, we've got 2 people on the page. Who else is on? Yes, so that is what is on the table. Would anyone like to make a motion to that effect?
Can I just ask something too, Diane?
Yes, please.
I mean, if the immediate need is to get help to dispatch, which I think we can all agree it is. I mean, Joe and Eric have just put some part-time help in at dispatch, so help is somewhat on the way. And if it's a function of just amending his budget to get more help on the way, that can happen relatively quickly, I believe. Like, if we're trying to put out heal the problem, I don't know how that's gonna happen quickly by putting it underneath the board of supervisors. Like that, I don't know how it can happen quicker than just leaving it where it's at and getting him the amended budget so he can, he's got a pretty good system of bringing part-time people in, the experienced dispatchers are working with them, trying to get them up to speed, it takes time, but if you keep backfilling that part-time, bringing them into full-time, and it seems to, alleviate the pain of, not overworked dispatchers. It's just a thought.
So, I appreciate you guys getting the part-time help in there, but I don't think that's the issue. The issue's not bringing in part-time help, because that's being done, the issue is supervision. And I hear your pain as far as, you guys gotta be out patrolling, and because you're short-staffed right now, but we do need somebody to start supervising and setting direction for dispatch. I think we need to do that sooner than later.
Yeah. There are 15 other counties in the state that have put dispatch under EMA, so it's, we're looking at those models on how to get this accomplished and how to do it the right way. They're, struggles.
We're not reinventing the wheel.
Exactly, so we're trying to learn from, what they've done and fit it to our situation too.
Have you gotten feedback from those counties on how that's going?
I haven't spoken to them specifically. I know Ann, who's our attorney that's helping us with the 2080 agreement has. I don't know if you've spoken to anybody or Troy. Have you actually spoken with any of those counties?
No, that's me.
Yeah.
I've been in Scott County, Johnson County.
And I think that there's more or less a consensus that is the ultimate destination for dispatch. I mean, I'm not hearing objections from the sheriff at this point. I think the board seems relatively on board with that. Are there any dispatch that are currently under a board of supervisors office in the state?
I do not know the answer to
that. My guess is not. But that's my concern, is that I'm ill-equipped to know the standards in which these folks need to be at. That is so far out of my wheelhouse, I can't tell you that with words. So
would you be
if
more?
If the EMA director is taking the lead, I mean, you gotta show it to me, otherwise I will tell you, I would give you my preference to leave it at the sheriff's office, hire additional full-time and maybe a supervisor and keep it the status quo until 22. But I don't feel like I should be, or am capable of being responsible for what they do specifically.
Well, the sheriff did come to us to call Crystal and.
I did, but never did I mention the transfer to the board of supervisors.
No,
Never-
said you
never
wanted.
once did I say
Right,
that.
that's what I was
said
gonna say, go to EMA.
Given how circumstances have changed in the last few months, and I reached out to Crystal, and if this is where, especially after the E911 meeting, speaking with the chiefs, I value their input, value the EMA's input. One transition from the sheriff's office to the EMA, and we have approximately, the budget's gotta be set a little early, but we have 12 months to make that happen. You guys have talked about working on this for 2 years, 2+ years. The 2080 agreement, is that ready? I mean, would that be ready to go next week? Or is that still
Next
being
week?
worked on?
Next month, maybe?
Okay, so that's 2 years in the work there. I think the one transition is gonna be best. Where the supervisor, the money has to come from the board. Whether they fund it or whether they do an amendment to my budget in 22 after, that money has to come from them regardless. The one transition I think is gonna be smooth. It can be to where, and this is for you, I guess others to decide, the hiring board, if it will, I don't know that it should be specifically EMA, I don't know, it shouldn't be specifically 911, there should be a coalition there because we're all end users. You get hired, there isn't an issue of having to come through me to approve something. I think, but even if you guys wanna look at it that way, I think it can be done with an EMA board and an E911 board through the sheriff's office for the next 12 months quicker than it could be through the board of supervisors. Because of the 3 board members that we have, I think it would be more efficient to go that route. We can work hand in hand, get it up and rolling. That way, when it comes time for budget next year, when it comes time to switch the fiscal year, the transition is one time, not 2 or 3 landing spots between here and there.
So what I'm hearing is we need the board of supervisors to approve the hiring of a supervisor to work with the sheriff's office with dispatch until EMA can take it over. Does that
Or-
seem to track for everybody?
Or can it go straight to EMA?
That's what I heard you just say the first time, but.
But can it go straight to EMA?
But my understanding was we can't because we don't have a budget for it.
Right.
130,000 isn't gonna support the dispatchers.
But you could effectively transfer the current dispatch budget from the Board of Sheriffs over, or the Sheriff's Office over to EMA to pay for that.
If you're gonna amend a budget, what difference does it matter which budget you're amending?
Does the EMA have the funds to hire a supervisor?
Not in
Right
this,
now.
not in this budget. We did, it wasn't our budget
We pushed it
previously,
back to the
but.
supervisors. For
So
2022.
effectively, the money's gotta come from the board of supervisors to hire a supervisor.
Which
But the
we've already
manage-
got a
then-
supervisor.
Then I suppose EMA can manage that.
It's
because-
it's just,
They're talking about.
the wording, it said communications director, someone who would oversee the whole thing.
Are you lost a little, Sherry?
Well, no, I'm just.
Okay, well, hold on, I want members to talk here, let's get this worked out, and if you have questions, I'd like you to jump in. So, I guess I'm looking to the board of supervisors here. What's possible financially there, as far as transferring budgets between Sheriff's Department and EMA?
We usually budget in January and February for
Right.
these decisions, for
Right.
these big positions, so it's a pretty tough question to put on this, the answer just in this meeting on it.
I would say, what's the path to get there, maybe?
The path to get there would be to do a resolution at the Board of Supervisors meeting and pull off the general fund. I think that's a path. And it would be up to the Board of Supervisors.
You should be able to do a transfer of funds from one fund to another. You probably have to have a public hearing and then a resolution
I don't
to
know if
authorize
it's-
it to do it.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know if they're the right service area. We'd have to.
I have to ask.
Yeah, that's
I
gonna
can't
be very
commit to something
sketchy.
without knowing whether or not we can, but The answer is maybe, and we can find out and let you know this week. If that's an option.
Transferring it to EMA, that's my question.
So,
But
Board of Supervisors will
I
look
can
at.
see the logic for putting them underneath the board if we were gonna hire a supervisor to take care of them, just like we do in zoning, just like we do engineer. So I understand that logic.
So, question, was there sheriff's budget for dispatch, was there funds for the communication director?
Yes.
Yes,
In his budget?
yes.
Yeah, 80,000 was moved over.
So that would, that's all
In
part
past,
of
in past, not this year. Not 22, that was not reallocated. It was in the past, but it's not in 22, no.
So they took that out.
And where is that money?
Back,
It didn't go
it's just back in the county.
It
Yeah.
disappeared.
Well, it's just back in the county.
It just never got allocated for a budget, so it's
So
collected or reproduction or whatever, it wasn't allocated budget for it.
So that would probably be a step 2 to allocate funds for communications director out of general fund as well. Let's do it.
Okay, motion.
Well, I
Is the motion this?
Make a
I moved that Eric cook.
Can we make a motion pending Board of Supervisors findings? Cannot?
I don't think so. I think we need to table these until Aaron finds out what's possible.
Okay.
Well, what I know is not possible, well, that's my question, is taking funds from the general fund and giving it to EMA and the supplemental fund mid-year like this. I don't know. That is something I don't know.
Well, that's just the transfers like that are just routine between governmental agencies, so. We do transfer funds from our departments.
Okay.
But I think if we're, are we talking, which budget year are we talking about?
22.
Okay.
23 is about done.
There ain't nothing gonna happen before 12.
21's
Yeah.
21's
Okay. All right, so do I have a motion to table?
Okay,
Or
I'm not
Crystal,
there.
do you have anything?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. Can you
Okay.
refresh my memory?
So that,
What?
we're on the dispatch path discussion with possible action. If there's no possible
Hey.
action, I'll take a motion to table it. And then we're gonna have to wait and see what Board of Supervisors says about moving those funds
Moving
to
the
EMA.
payroll.
Moving
for
funds from the sheriff's department
Uh-huh,
that was earmarked for dispatch
uh-huh.
to EMA. One, is that possible? And then two, I assume we could just do a general fund,
Okay.
true up on a supervisor position.
For
or a
fiscal year
or a
22.
division.
For fiscal year 22.
For fiscal year 22.
Because we wouldn't be able to take it over until fiscal year 23. Right?
I think that's right.
Yes.
Wow.
After,
Okay.
Well,
after July.
yeah.
We might have a little time. It isn't. It would
You want to get a supervisor hired before July?
Potentially. We'll see if it's doable.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so we're looking for a motion to table pending the board's findings, is that what we're looking
Yes.
for? So I'll make a motion to
Okay.
table and pending the board's findings.
Okay,
Second.
all right. I have a
Do we need a not
Motion.
to exceed? Just-
Well, we'll just have to come back to the discussion, depending upon what we find out. All right, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, same sign. Okay. All right, so item number 8 is kind of a moot point. Discussion to transition dispatch, management, and budget from sheriff to board of supervisors. So that's all tied in, but formally I'll take a motion to table that as well.
No, I just let that one die.
Okay,
It's not gonna go to the board of
Okay.
supervisors.
all right. All right, no action. Item number 9, this is discussion of the draft 28E agreement between dispatch and Warren County Board of Supervisors and Emergency Management. Do we need to have this discussion? You want us to give a brief overview of it, where we are, or?
It is probably a meeting away from being ready to hand to the Board of Supervisors and the EMA Commission, so that they can take a look and agree or disagree, change the content of it so that it can be ready by October before we go into our budget. So we can have that finalized.
Okay.
When you say a meeting, like a couple weeks or a month or
We have
2
a-
weeks?
we have a
Tomorrow.
meeting tomorrow.
Oh, you have a meeting tomorrow, excellent.
Well, we have a meeting tomorrow about the 28E.
Yeah, just the
Oh,
2080 and
But
then
like 3 weeks or 4 weeks before it gets to the Board of Supervisors, you're thinking?
we'll see tomorrow. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean,
Just about, I'm just
yeah,
curious.
I think it's very ready because we're not gonna get it to the point where you're gonna agree with everything and the EMA is gonna agree with everything. So we may as well just give it to you.
Yeah.
You make your changes, we come together, make the final, and we can sign it, so.
All right. Any public input?
Was there anything about changing the 3 part-timers to full-timers? Did I miss that?
We did not have that discussion tonight.
Otherwise,
Okay. Anything else? All right. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
I'm sorry. Who's got the motion?
It has to be the commission. It has to be the commission.
Tandy?
I'll make a motion to
Okay.
adjourn.
All set.
All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you all very much.